The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in this world. And thank you for joining us today on our latest DevOps.com webinar. No tool is an island, building DevOps into your business, sponsored by Tasktop. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the moderator for today's event. And we do have a great event on tap, but before we get things started, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of today's webinar, just take heart knowing that you will be able to view this webinar on demand. We should be able to provide a link within the next, I would say, 24 to 48 hours, and you can access that video on demand at any time after that. Also, we are going to be taking questions from the audience, and our speakers will be answering questions probably the last 15 minutes or so of today's webinar. So if you have a question for our panelists, please feel free to submit your question at any time using the control panel. And like I said, we'll take about 15 minutes near the end of the webinar and go through those questions. Okay, with that, I would like to introduce today's two speakers. The first is John Rouser, who is IT manager at Tasktop. Welcomes, John. Thank you for joining me today. Hello, John.
Hi, John
How
here.
are you?
Thanks a lot for having us today.
That's that mute button. I know how it can be sometimes. We also have Robert Elves Sr., who's Director of Product Management at Tasktop. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Hi, Charlene. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, I'm glad you guys both could join me today for this webinar. And I would like you guys to maybe introduce yourselves, tell the audience, give the audience a little bit of information, and then John, you can go ahead and kick things off.
Hey, so John here. I'm IT manager at Tasktop. I've been here for about 2 years. I have a long history of working in software startups, going back about 10 years or so. And the last 2 years of my life have been an excellent journey here at Tasktop, really getting deep into the software delivery space. A lot of exciting stuff going on here right now. So we're looking forward to giving this presentation today. Rob?
Yeah, and I'm Robert Elves. I'm currently Senior Director of Product at Tasktop, but my background is as a software engineer, and I'm actually a co-founder of Tasktop. So I've been here for the whole journey.
Great. So we'll just get started. So today's webinar is called No Tool an Island. So what does that mean? Well, Rob and I both believe strongly that the value of a system is found in the quality and fidelity of the relationships between its parts. So this is our guiding principle. This is something that we think about often and that we build into how we approach problems, both on a technical and a strategic level. For us, a well-designed system is built around these relationships between the parts. And when executed poorly, these represent hard limits on the effectiveness of a system. On the other hand, when done well, these relationships are force multipliers. They allow the system to deliver far more value than the individual parts are able to produce on their own. So it follows that the business as a system needs to be organized and designed around these relationships and connections. This is not a new idea. This goes way back. But a way that we feel the idea was captured quite well is in Managing the Design Factory, written 20 years ago. And Rob and I actually connected on this book, and it goes deep into this idea of system thinking, focusing on the relationships, focusing on how those parts come together to deliver value. So what does this mean for the DevOps community? Well, DevOps is killing it right now on a big chunk of the value stream. No one's going to argue that. But one thing is we're not closing the gap between the planning and lifecycle management of software delivery. So what we need to do is follow our guiding principle, extend the DevOps values of fast feedback, experimentation, and look at the problem as the bigger picture. So in the first half of our presentation today, we're going to be using some key inflection points in the growth of Tasktop to demonstrate the increasing value of relationships and as the complexity of the system grows. And then in the second half of the presentation, we're going to look at 5 specific ways that we built our business around its relationships. We're going to show you the first 5 pages from our playbook on integrations. These are extremely high value solutions that you can take and implement in your organization today, and all of which will make you, let's just say they'll make you a hero. So with that said, we're going to start off, we're going to look at Tasktop, and Rob's going to tell us a bit about what it's like here.
Yeah. Wow. And so what a journey it has been at Tasktop. It's, I think, 10 plus years. And it's just been a pleasure working with some really smart people and really fun people. And we're at 120, I think it's 120 plus and growing rapidly. And really the what we've developed here at Tasktop is the culture of continuous improvement and rigorous testing and automation of those tests. And without that, we would have failed long ago, really. And I think that rigor stems from our roots in academia. So we're actually a spin-off from the University of British Columbia here in Vancouver. But we're not afraid to change. You know, nothing's etched in stone, and that's pervasive throughout the organization. And so that extends, you know, so not only are we focused on improving the DevOps side of things, and that's moving, but also just our general practices and communication practices are always up for debate and for improvement. And that's shone through, you know, just in our Scrum practice, for example. So, you know, I've hired numerous people over the years that when they get here and they see how we execute on our Scrum practices on our engineering teams, they comment and say, you know, we've never seen this done as well at any of our previous organizations. So, but by comparison to our customers, we're relatively small. You know, we're a 120 person organization, and we're working with the largest organizations in the world. We count half of the Fortune 100 as our customers, and many of the Global 2000. And we're helping them deliver on their software value streams better and faster.
And you know, just like our customers though, our company has grown, become more complex. The needs are changing. The values have become, the values have evolved. And so we've taken these steps to experiment, to improve, not just in our DevOps toolchain, but across the organization. And that sort of brings us to the second half of the title of the presentation is we're very focused on how we build DevOps into the business. It's more than just getting it right. It's making sure we're building the right things.
Right on.
So this is where it all began.
Yeah. So this exactly. So this is you know, it's a 3-person show at this point, and early days. Collaboration is really easy. You could call it swivel seat collaboration. A whiteboard literally captures the entire company plan, if you will.
You can see there's some parts of the value stream that aren't even touched yet. Yeah. It's an engineering. It's all engineers at this point. And
let's be honest, we don't even know what those roles are within an organization at that point. And we're using one tool to capture everything. You know, we've got Bugzilla's tracking all our work. It's one tool, it's a tiny team, and a lot of decisions are made on the fly, and it's all that information that's really staying within our collective conscious of all 3 of us. We're 15-hour days, releases are happening at 8:30 on a Friday night. I think I was using an IDE and a couple scripts to ship the bits. You know, decisions are quick and simple at this stage, but that's because it's small. There's only 3 of you, and it's a startup.
It's a startup, and what's interesting is that when you have a small system like this, those relationships are tight, and they just have to be, or there is no organization. I mean, that's what it is. It's a couple people. They're sitting in a room. They're cranking out code. They lean over to talk to each other. That's the extent of those relationships and those connections, and they're solid. And that's what allows the startup to deliver so quickly and such high quality software. But you know, you start adding some people in here. You start hiring. You're growing a little bit.
Yeah, you suddenly one day you wake up and you're at 10, 15, 20, 30 people, and you really honestly you're looking at each other and say, wow, we're not dead yet. as a company, you know.
Yeah.
And we've got customers, but you know, you're still looking for product market fit, but you know, you're starting to move forward, and you're still being really economical. So we're stretching Bugzilla to its limits. You know, Bugzilla is for everything here, as you can see, but it's really starting to show its limitations. You know, certainly, let me just say that Bugzilla makes for a crappy CRM or HR tool. But you know, we're still effectively communicating through the artifacts in the Bugzilla. That's a key point here. We're able to stretch it, but we're able to communicate through those artifacts. Decisions across this organization, as you can see, are being captured and held within Bugzilla.
And what's interesting, you know, I wasn't there at the time, but I've talked to a number of people about what it was like, and they say that you know, the turnaround on things was lightning fast. So the entire company being in Bugzilla, well, yes, Bugzilla makes a crappy HR tool. At the same time, when everybody's working in the same tool, it makes it really easy to capture all the work, capture everything that's happening in the organization. I remember when I came on board 2 years ago, so this is, you know, 8 years into the company, we were still supporting those Bugzilla repositories, those Bugzilla databases, because that was the company up till about 6 years in. Everything was in Bugzilla, so we had to keep those around. If somebody needed historical information, hey, there's only one place to go look. It's Bugzilla.
Yeah, where were those decisions recorded?
Yeah.
So, but then, you know, you've got another product, and wow, you've just closed a Series A. You've got some money, and you're starting to see some tool and team specialization here. So no longer have you got Bugzilla, you've moved to Jira maybe, you've got Salesforce showing up on the scene, so you got more tools, more teams, and yeah, it's functional specialization is starting, because you know, people really want the right tool for the job.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point, especially doing enterprise sales, you need a CRM. Bugzilla's not going to cut it anymore, and you know, Salesforce isn't cheap either. So it's a decision that a company has to make. Are we going to start siloing this information? And you know, yes, the answer is yes. You have to do it, but you know, it is going to. It automatically creates some distance between those teams. You know, similarly with other tools that get added here, you know, it's creating that separation. It's breaking down the continuity, the single system that the organization was. And so, you know, what happens when we really explode? Well, you know, you end up with something like this. You know, we've taken on more money here. The team has grown to 120 people. And you look at this picture, and you know, I had to crunch it in here because there's so many tools. This doesn't even capture all the tools we're using here. I think there's maybe 20, 25 tools on this chart, but what's clear here is that there's a lot of specialization. You know, you can see that, you know, especially in the green boxes here, we've picked up a lot of tools that people want to be using. So the engineers want to be on Git Garrett. They want to be using Jenkins. They want to be using Ansible and Docker to deploy and things like this. So you know, we have to let people make those choices. But even on the planning and the lifecycle side, different teams they're requesting, they want to use their own tool. You know, we hire in somebody, they want to bring on their tool that they're used to, that they're comfortable in using. So you know, we get the product team to start using their own planning tool.
Yeah, exactly. And so, which is great. You know, you want the right people using the right tools, but inevitably it starts causing this disconnect. So all the white space you see here between the tools, that actually ends up to being a problem, right? The left hand no longer knows what the right hand is doing, and results in a ton of externalized communication overhead to get the job done. Now, unfortunately, because of that, you know, you can have things happen. So, for example, you know, you've got the field, the sales, and teams making requests through Salesforce, perhaps, or sending in emails, but you know, and you've got your engineering team executing efficiently, you know, delivering bits, shipping bits really fast, but you know, but 2 months later you discover that deal actually dried up because somebody sent an email that got off somewhere. So there's just a massive disconnect from the front end to the back end of this value stream because of the specialization, but because these tools are not connected and the information is no longer flowing.
They've essentially, the tools have become islands. They become their own little ecosystem of efficiency. But you know, the fact is, there's people living on these islands. So you can see all of a sudden those colors are making sense. Why we had those colors on that toolchain map? Well, those colors are different teams, and each of those teams is in those tools. That's where they live. That's where they do their work. So essentially, the tools are a proxy for those teams and people. At a small scale, everything was, that collective consciousness was all contained in the room. But you look at this, clearly it's difficult to maintain that collective consciousness, and organizations do all kinds of things to try and keep that alive and keep it in the forefront, but it's difficult.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is we've had the opportunity to speak with tons of companies, hundreds of companies, the largest companies. And inevitably, when we talk to them and we ask them to draw their value stream, that inevitably they'll move to the whiteboard and they'll draw a network diagram, boxes with lines connecting the boxes to describe the flow of information through the value stream. But when you dig in, it turns out those lines that they drew between those boxes, frankly, they don't exist. And really, when you dig in, it's actually somebody who's printed out a spreadsheet and walked across a hall and typed it into their test management tool, let's say on the other side. Or somebody's running some manual export, import, batch operation to get that to work. So really, it's a fallacy that the tools are actually connected.
And that's crazy. It is. But what we're seeing is that the DevOps community is recognizing this problem. And fundamental principle of DevOps is automation. It's culture and bringing everything together and system level thinking. So that's what we're seeing now with the DevOps community. We want to extend that and so it's end to end across the organization. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually have a look at our integration playbook. So here at Tasktop, we've come up with some ways. We've really focused on this and come up with some ways that we can build those relationships, build those connections, find the key points where we can integrate to bring these tools, bring these teams together as a single system. So this is my crappy tool chain diagram. No, I'm not a graphics designer. You can tell that in one way from the crappy tool chain diagram. You can also tell that in the many hours it took to make this. So yeah, it took a long time. It came out poorly, but the point is here is what we're going to do is we're going to take you through these five areas where we've implemented integration on this tool chain.
Can I just say that this is not unlike the diagram I see customers drawing on whiteboards. So this is exactly what it looks like. You've got a bunch of systems. There are lines between it because this is what they believe to be reality.
Yeah, and the fact is, when I drew this, those lines were not real. So what we had to do was go through this diagram and figure out, okay, where is the most waste happening? Where's the disconnect in this tool chain? And you'll see on the top left side of the diagram is life cycle, and the bottom right side is all DevOps. So we need to build these together. We need to get this flow going so that the customer request comes out and is linked to the actual pipeline on the other side of the diagram. So we started off, you can see the numbered points here. The first is this field request workflow. So getting that customer request and funneling it into the company backlog. Secondly is the product engineering integration. So getting the requests that are on the company backlog onto the team backlog so that people can actually work on them. Third is the ITSM or IT workflow, where developers are requesting resources. Those resources need to be assigned or connected to the work that's being performed. So we created an integration there. And finally, actually not finally, fourthly is the internal engineering workflow. So the code is being worked on. Again, we need to connect that back to the actual planning and the work item. And then finally, is the reporting. So how do we get a unified view of all this information, all this work that's flowing across this tool chain, across this value stream, and put it somewhere so that we can get some value out of it. So let's jump into the first first play here, the first page from our playbook.
Yeah.
Field request process.
So our first play here is the objective is to get your field requests into the product backlog. And by field, I mean your sales team, basically those people that represent your customers, making it easy for them to get stuff onto the backlog and to communicate with that. So in our experience, what happens is as you grow as a company, you get multiple customer-facing teams, and they're all want to funnel features into the backlog. So you've got your sales team, you've got your biz dev team operating, you've started up expanding your partner program, and now you're kicking off OEM. So things are growing, lots of requests are coming in, and you need a tool to manage that. So as more requests come in and the number of requests increase, the problems on the front end start to emerge. So for those people in the field, how do they submit that request? What's the state of that request? And what happens inevitably is the external communication overhead that happens because of emails and things like that. The number of people and teams getting involved just to answer simple questions like, what is the state of my request? Is it going to be in the release? Is it released? Things like that become just a burden. And so the idea is to bring that communication back down to the artifacts that represent that information.
Yeah. So the actual integration is between Salesforce and Target Process. Salesforce being the tool that these customer-facing teams are working in. You've got your support services, your customer success, your sales, your biz dev. They're all working in Salesforce. That's the tool they know and love. And let me tell you, from an IT perspective, I have enough trouble getting these people off of Outlook. I'm definitely not going to get them into Jira. It's just or Target Process. It's just not going to happen. They don't want to use it. They don't even want to learn it. So, and fair enough, right? So the idea is if they can submit their request in Salesforce, there's an integration that carries that request immediately over to the tool that product is using. It's called Target Process. And then the communication, the information about that request is all captured in the artifact, the object that exists in those tools. So you don't need to email back and forth. You don't need to get status updates on Slack. Just go look at the artifact. As soon as it gets updated on the product side, it gets updated on the sales side, and everybody can see what's going on. It's communication through the artifact. And that's what's so amazing here, is it eliminates all this communication waste, all this handoff waste, all these visibility problems, because it's just one place to look, and it's capturing both sides of this coin.
And everybody gets to use the tool that's right for them, while still effectively communicating with the other teams.
That's right, yeah. So it's kind of resurrecting that Bugzilla of the olden days, where everybody was working on the same tool and the same artifacts. Here, we're recreating that experience. So different tools, same artifact. Really valuable, really key, and it's actually changed. It's changed the way that the organization works. That's how powerful this integration was. So,
play two.
Let's move to play two.
All right.
Boom.
So for this play, we'll call it flowing the prioritized features to the right engineering team plans. So we've got the requests coming in, and they're being managed by the product team. And I'm sure in the slightly earlier days when the product team was trying to manage the backlog in Jira, they found that was just prohibitive to their role. There's just way too many requests from way too many different sources, and it's just not built for that job. You wouldn't hand a hammer to a painter and ask them to do their best work. So, we've hired a VP of product. They've got the tools that they want to use. We're going to give them the right tools for the job. So how do you then get that information from the tool that product uses to the developers? Well, initially it's a manual process of doing your planning, and then again, like I said earlier, walk across the hall essentially and enter the plan into Jira. Well, that's just a waste.
It is a waste.
So in this play, what we executed is to integrate Target Process with Jira, so that just by virtue of the product managers doing their job and assigning the right products to the request features coming in, those will naturally flow to the right team to get that work done.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about this integration is that one of the challenges that we initially faced here was, well, how do we get those features onto the right teams? onto the backlog of the right team. So like Rob just said there, simply by setting a field in target process, that field then gets used in the logic to assign this work item to the right team. And then the information flows back and forth. There's a synchronization after that. So again, we're communicating on the artifacts. We don't have to have all these meetings and emails and so on to find out what's going on in the status. The product team can still work in target process and manage a company-wide backlog, this huge company-wide backlog that all has to be prioritized and strategically mapped to initiatives in the organization. It's a very difficult task. There's 10 people on the product team right now, and they're all doing this and thinking
very
different.
Busy.
Pardon me?
And they're all very busy.
And they're all very busy. That's right. So
they don't have time to answer emails.
They don't, and they don't really have time to think about okay, well, how do I go about getting this information? I mean, we just need to funnel that up right away as soon as it happens.
Yeah, it's all about reducing the friction, of moving that information through the value stream.
Through the value stream, yeah. So here again, we're looking at target process. We're looking at getting items from target process onto specific teams' backlogs in Jira. And we're doing that by a little customization on each side and then synchronization between the tools. It's a high value integration that, again, changes the way we work.
Mm-hmm. All right, so play number 3. So for this play, we're going to go lower level here. So here we're talking about flowing the commits. So this is code commits back to the stories for which the change took place. So you're moving fast now. Your teams have got their epics. They're breaking them down to stories, and they're just cranking code out. But quickly there becomes a disconnect right there. So now, if changes are happening in Git, they're completely decoupled. Git is another tool, right? You've got Jira that's tracking what needs to happen, the why, and then the how, the what's actually happening is taking place in a whole nother tool, Git. So this leads to all sorts of traceability problems. So just at a practitioner level, the developers, have a hard time. They're wasting time communicating about which code corresponds to which effort. Handoffs between developers, collaboration, all that is getting lost because of this disconnect. So, questions like, what code changed as part of the story? That's a pretty basic question. Can't easily be answered. And then even at from the DevOps side of things and the release side of things, which features, were in which release? That's a problem.
Tough question to answer. So again, now you're seeing this end-to-end flow forming here. Now, we talked about the request coming in through Salesforce, hitting target process, hitting Jira, and now we're connecting it to the actual work, the code that's being written.
Yeah.
So now we're really getting some visibility, and if you'll be able to see on a higher level, like Rob just said, which feature was included in a release, and a person in the field who's working with those releases and is giving the release to a customer will be able to look up which feature was in that release.
Yeah. So at the low level here, what's happened is we've got essentially a post commit hook, to Git or Garrett, and that's pushing that information about that review or that commit to the Jira ticket, which you can just see a screenshot here right now.
So let's take it one level even deeper. Let's go a little bit deeper here. So now we need to figure out where that work is actually being performed. So this play is called the asset to plan play. So we're linking here the assets, the resources where the work is being done to the actual story that it's being done for. So we're getting traceability here between our infrastructure and our development team. So you can see in the picture here, this is a screenshot of an actual asset, and the asset lives in our virtual infrastructure. So what we're doing is we're pulling all the information out of our virtual infrastructure, we're syncing it into Jira, creating Jira issues for each asset that exists there, and then we can fill in some of our own information that's needed. But right on the ticket, as soon as an asset gets created, a ticket gets created. Right on the ticket, I can see where the asset exists, which data store it's on, how much RAM it has, how much CPU it has, And then furthermore, I can see which request was this related to, what work was being performed on this server. So then when, if there's a problem with the asset, I just go to the ticket. I can see exactly the state of the asset. I can see, oh, who was doing work on that? Oh, it's very clear that team was doing work on it, and I can go talk to them, figure out what they were doing, and then get to the source of the problem. So we're taking this integration even deeper now, right down to the infrastructure level, connecting it all together, and giving a high level of visibility into what's happening. Speaking of visibility.
Yes, so our final play here is value stream reporting. So and by now, I think we can all agree that specialization, tool specialization, functional specialization is necessary. Having the right tool for the right job is just the way things are going. Best of breed. That's understood. But the side effect of this is that it necessarily creates the disconnect between tools that we've discussed. But the tools themselves are actually just represent the facets of the work that's being done. So for any given body of work that's to happen, each tool represents a facet of that single body of work to be delivered. And so now with this disconnected tool chain, how do you get a full picture? How do you get a unified view? Well, essentially what we need to do here is we need to somehow reconstitute those facets to get a unified view over our value stream. And this is an insanely hard problem, and even we are in the early stages of executing on this. But because of the integration infrastructure we've put in place, we've been able to pull the information that's important and create visualizations using our BI tool.
Right. So what you want is every development organization wants to set up these information radiators and be able to put up on a big screen what's happening in your organization. Everybody can see it. It's a classic agile strategy to enable the development teams. So what you can see here on the screen is a sample from one of our radiators where it's providing real-time insight into the work that's being performed. So we're still working on this as a work in progress, but we're funneling this information into this database and then pointing a business intelligence tool at the database. We haven't even figured out what the best business intelligence tool is to use yet. We're working on that, but you can see here that what we're doing is we're giving the teams the ability to have a 360 view, and not just from one tool, but from across the infrastructure that they're using. So what is that, how does this all come together? Like, you're probably asking yourself, well,
how do we implement this?
How do we implement this? So this is our...
So luckily we have a tool to achieve this. So where John brought the crappy value stream diagram from before, I'm going to bring our tool. So this is essentially our value stream map here. But the difference here is that this is real. So these nodes are actual tools, and these arcs are actual integrations between those tools. So at the beginning, we've discussed about play number one, connecting our requests into our product management tool. And so here you can see we've got Salesforce connected to target process, and there's this arc here is a physical integration between these two, and this integration is running and making sure that those requests are flowing to the right team at the right time. Second, we talked about how we're connecting our product backlog or our company-wide backlog to the right teams, development teams that are using Jira. And here you can see we've got another integration flowing information to Jira.
What you don't see there, you see the single line. What you don't see is all the logic that we talked about that's getting performed to actually get the right issues into the right backlogs there. So something that's really interesting, and if you dig into this tool chain diagram, it actually reveals quite a bit of stuff that's going on there. It's not like we talked about earlier with empty lines. These are high quality, high fidelity integrations being shown here.
Yeah, and here we've got the change sets coming in and decorating the stories that you saw a screenshot of, and we've got some IT.
Those are the IT integrations
coming in.
The bottom
here,
right
on the
there.
bottom. And finally, we've got the reporting that we've started on here to generate that dashboard. So all these integrations are live and running, and as we need to add more or change more or change an integration and update it with information, we can do that all here from this one point.
Yeah. So this is our value stream at this stage, and we've gone through the 5 ways that the 5 different pages from our playbook that each one of these sets of lines here is related to. So the overall idea here, and bringing it back to how we got here and the process that we used, we wanted to create a strategy around the value stream. We needed to be able to come at this from a system-wide approach and figure out what the problems are, and then come up with a solution. So the first thing I'll point out there is that this is a strategy. This is an approach that there's a top level, starting from the 10,000-foot view and then working and figuring out each piece. So firstly, we identified the problem. So we're looking for areas. We're trying to figure. We're recognizing that there is an issue with the end-to-end.
Yeah, that's the first step. Admit you have a problem.
Admit you have a problem. That's right. And then we sat down and we mapped out our value stream, our current state, and we came up with some really, there's a lot of very neat room for improvement in there. We were able to identify, okay, there's a lot of waste happening in this area. There's a lot of poor handoffs happening in that area. And so based on that value stream diagram, we came up with, well, what do we want this organization to look like? And I'll just call out here that this isn't, we're not inventing this approach here. This is the same approach that the manufacturing used back in the 70s, back in the 80s to improve their factories. This is the same way that they did it. They start with a value stream and then they determine their future state. Now they need a group of people that can get together and work at this problem as a unit. So that's step 4. Set up an integration working group. For us, that meant getting people together across the organization and then piecing out, okay, these are the areas that we want to focus on first, and completing those areas, iterating over and making sure everything's working, and then proceeding to the next area and so on.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a problem that you want to tackle end to end all in one shot, but you can identify the greatest value add points and tackle those specific integrations first and roll it out incrementally.
That's right.
The key is to have the right stakeholders at the table that can make change, and then put an integration infrastructure in place and improve their delivery continuously.
Yeah, that's right. So that's us for today. Again, I'm John Rouser. You can contact me on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle up there, and same with Rob. So we're happy to take any questions at this point in time. And thank you very much for listening and giving us your attention for this period of time.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you to you both for what an interesting conversation that you guys had. I love that stuff. I do want to remind the audience that if you have a question for Rob or for John, please feel free to use the control panel and submit your questions, and we will go ahead and get started with the questions that we do have. Okay, let's see. First question, how do you decide which problems to tackle?
Oh, wow, great question. Well, like I said, every organization is different, and every organization is at a different state of evolution. You just saw our evolution over time, and but essentially, going back to what John said, it's identify where your hot spots are, and a big indicator is where there's just a lot of overhead in communication, where there should be actual record of decisions and coordination. Those are always a good place to look for hotspots.
And then also you want to focus on the waste, the waste that's going on. I mean, that's the lean approach to solving these problems. Is where's the waste happening? And you can get some inspiration from the classic 7 forms of waste, or there's other updated forms of waste for software delivery. But you take a page from there and start looking at your organization and seeing, okay, where is this happening? Where are these handoffs going bad? Where are we unable to execute due to lag in communication? Things like that. So that's a great place to start as well, to look at areas you can improve.
Okay. All right, great. Kind of maybe a follow-up question to that. I'm not quite sure, from Rajarshi, who's asking, how do you decide which tool to select, or how do you decide a tool to select?
Well, that's a great question, and ideally, your tool infrastructure is modular, so you're able to make decisions. And you saw in our evolving, as our organization evolved, and that value stream tool map changed, where teams in the business were able to pick the tool that they wanted to use, and so that's what we really want to enable people to do, is to use the tool that they feel is going to provide the best value, and then approach the problem from an integration standpoint. It's not, if you force people into tools, or if you over specialize, and you ignore the integration problem, then you're going to be ignoring this what we call our guiding principle, the idea that this is a system, and those relationships between the systems are what really add the value.
Okay, all right, great. Let's see, moving along then. Next question, do you have any preference to type of agile development, such as Kanban or SAFe or something like that?
Oh wow, that's a dangerous question. So we've I wouldn't say I have a preference. So like I said, so Tasktop, we've evolved our practices over time, and I think depending on the team you talk to and the type of delivery that team is focused on, you might find different practices. So you might find a pure Scrum being executed in one team, but another team might be full Kanban.
Yeah, and part of that too is, again, giving them the choice. Like, what's interesting is some of our non-technical teams are using agile practices. For example, our business development is using Lean Kit to manage their work, and they use Kanban, and they find it very effective. And I think a lot of teams in our organization are using Kanban. Mm-hmm. But we give them that choice. They pick the format that works best for them. And then together with that is that they might need to choose a tool, so or they might need to customize the tool that they're currently using. So we have to enable that as well.
Great. All right. Eric asked that question, and I'm sure he's very happy to get your answer. So moving on to the next question. But before I do, I want to remind you guys, if you do have a question for Rob or John, it's not too late to get your question in. Just use the control panel, and we're monitoring them as they come in. So feel free to get it on in at any time. Okay, the next question, who is a part of your working group?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So who do we include in our working group? So here at Tasktop, essentially we pulled people, kind of a core implementation work group, if you will, that's responsible for the integration infrastructure, and that consists of people from the NJOP side of things, from IT, from engineering, and from product, and a couple other teams, I think. So that core team is responsible for implementation, if you will. But then what happens is, as you find those areas of waste, where you find those hotspots in your organization that you want to improve, that's when you then form kind of a side working group with practitioners from those teams, and you bring those folks into a conversation. I always joke that really when you start talking to two different teams and they have this need to integrate, that really it's an exercise in marriage counseling, because everybody has their perspective on things, and when it comes to integrating, you've got to take all that account and get them to work together. And so you form these side working groups that are domain specific, if you will, within your organization. Execute on delivering that integration as a practitioner working group, and that's how we move forward.
All right, great. I have a question here from Rajarshi, who's asking, how do you address security and compliance issues as part of your value stream?
Oh, that's a very good question, and
near and dear to John's heart.
Near and dear to my heart as well. Yes, something I think about often. So we've made an investment in some specific security tools that do a lot of work for us, and then on top of that, we've made an investment in integrating those. So we didn't actually touch on those security integrations today because they're not quite through the loop yet. We're still working on those, but the idea is, we want to enable the DevOps idea of fast feedback. So we need to get the security related information back into the planning system as fast as possible. So when a static scan finishes, we want those results to hit the backlog right away, so that because it's extra work, it's unplanned work. So we do leave some capacity always to work on unplanned work, but we need to manage that capacity carefully. So that requires that fast feedback loop to get things back on the backlog. So that's the goal. We're working towards that. I won't get into the tools that we've invested in, but we definitely have made an investment there, and we continue to do so.
Great. I'm sure a lot of people are happy to hear that. Okay, next question. What are some of the cultural challenges that you guys faced when you were doing your thing there?
That's a great question as well. So the biggest cultural challenge actually is bringing on these new tools. You've heard the concept of technical debt. So when you make a technical decision that you're going to have to fix later, you're taking out a debt against the company.
You're going to have to pay it down at a later date.
You're going to have to pay it down. So in the same sense, when you bring on a tool, a new silo essentially into your organization, you're taking on some cultural debt. So that's a new concept that people need to think about in this context, is that you bring on this new tool, how does that impact my culture? What am I going to need to do to fix that down the road? And you will need to pay back that debt. So we see, again, this comes back to our guiding principle. We see anything that inhibits or impedes the relationships, connections between parts of an organization is going to be taking on some cultural debt. And you're going to need to pay that back later. That's where integration comes into play. That's where this whole initiative comes into play. Our product or company even. That's part of what we do. So
yeah, well said.
Thanks. All right.
All right, great, thanks. Let's see, do we have any other questions? No, we don't have any more questions right now, but if you do have a question for Rob or John, if you go ahead and get it in, we can get to it right now.
Or you can always hit us up on Twitter. We're always happy to answer questions on there.
Good point. And then also, if you have a question for Rob or John post-event, besides Twitter, I'm sure they would be more than happy to accept the questions by email as well, to the Tasktop email address. Okay, looking like we are. We do have one more. Well, this is. I'm not sure that that's a question. Well, possibly. Do you guys conduct regular webinars? Maybe on your product or technologies?
Yeah, so definitely if you just go to tasktop.com, you'll find links to the latest content and webinars, and we always have a stream of webinars going and tutorials. So by all means, check out tasktop.com, and if you don't find what you're looking for, again, like John said, just hit us up on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll do one. We'll do one for you.
Yeah. All right, great. You can also check out devops.com for the whole passel of webinars that we have on our website, upcoming and webinars on demand. So, all right, so it looks like we are pretty much, oh, wait, I just had one more question come in. So thank you, Philip, for sending something in. Did you have to deal with user adoption issues from separate teams like infrastructure and DBAs?
Adoption issues from DBAs.
Well, I think one of the things that we really like to get across to you here is that we're trying to avoid adoption issues is what we're trying to do. We're trying to let people work in their tool of choice and still have the system-wide effectiveness, the impact. So, that is the goal. I mean, not everybody wants to work in Jira. It's impossible to get sales to work in Jira. So we need to find a way to get that work out of Jira that doesn't involve email and meetings and phone calls and such.
Yeah, and we recognize that, we're, like I said, an organization of 120. These problems and cultural problems, if you will, in restructuring that organization are definitely more difficult at these large organizations that we work with. So thousands, tens of thousands of developers on some of these teams that we work with. So the problems, that you're alluding to are definitely there. And like I said, sometimes it's a little bit of marriage counseling and people sacrificing for the greater good of the company.
That's right.
Excellent. All right. Great. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and close out the question and answer period now. If you do have a question for Rob or John following this, hit them up on Twitter. Seems to be the communications channel of choice for those guys. So, and then, as I said before, please feel free to check DevOps.com for upcoming webinars that we have going on, as well as webinars on demand. Let's see, as I said before, this webinar has been recorded, or is being recorded. So if you missed any or all of today's webinar, go ahead and check the DevOps.com website 24 to 48 hours from now, and should be up on demand for you. And with that, I would just like to thank John Rouser and Robert Elves, Sr., for being today's panelists. And again, my name is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I was the moderator for today's event, and I hope everybody got a lot out of today's presentation. Thanks, guys, for joining me.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Enjoy your